If you've ever tried and failed at following a budget, it's likely that you made one of these budget blunders or failed in some of these budget best practices. So today, for our 99th episode of Retire Mentorship, we're going to cover 9 budgeting blunders and 9 budgeting best practices to help you make the most out of your cash flow and help you fund your dreams and goals. So let's get right into it. 9 budgeting blunders. Number 1 is having a complicated budget. There's some of us, right, that we maybe have tried budgeting before and we end up with this massive spreadsheet or this super complex way of doing things. We got 37 categories and 18 different accounts, and we're constantly moving money around and doing all these things. And it's just too complicated. We spend hours and hours a week trying to manage our budget, and eventually we just stop spending that time, aka we stop budgeting, because it's just too complicated. So the solution to this is to keep it simple, stupid, right? The good old KISS acronym. Keep it simple, stupid. Don't overcomplicate your budget. A complicated budget, especially one that you don't actually follow, is no better than a simple budget. Only use as many accounts as you need. Only use as many categories as you need to really keep track of everything that we need to do. And don't make it any more complicated than it needs to. Even I'm a nerd. I love spreadsheets. I love those kind of things. I started with a fairly complex budget, and even I pared mine back quite a bit because simple really is more elegant, it's better, and so don't overly complicate your budget. That's a big blunder that I see a lot of people doing. They create it super complicated. So skip that one. Budgeting blunder number 2 is the set and forget model, right? Where you set a budget. Maybe you get it at the end of the month, or at the beginning of the month, you're like, okay, I'm gonna make this amount of money this month. I want to spend this amount, I got these bills on here, and then I want to spend this amount here and that amount there, groceries, gas, all these things. And you set up this nice budget and it looks beautiful, and you got this great plan for how you're gonna spend your money and how you're gonna budget it, and then you just forget about it. You just don't do anything with it. And I know some people that do this every month. Every month they set a budget, but they don't track any transactions. They don't see, hey, am I actually hitting my budget? Am I underspending or overspending? Where am I actually at in terms of where I want my money to go? And so if you're not tracking your money along the way, it doesn't do you any good, right? And so, budget is a verb. It's not just a noun. It's not just a budget, a thing that we make. We budget, right? We actively engage with our money, with our budget over time. And so it's not just about setting a budget or creating a budget. It's about, tracking those transactions, making sure that we're categorizing where our money's going and seeing along the way, hey, are we on track with our budget? We don't want to create a budget. We want to budget. Actively engage in that. So set up good financial habits and stay on track with your budget. Number 3, budget blunder number 3 is manual tracking. This is where you're spending tons of time, again, importing transactions, or even worse, like literally copying them over from a checkbook or a bank statement or something like that, and you're inputting all the different ways that you've spent money into a budget manually. And this is a gigantic waste of time, right? That we have software that will do that for us. Don't do these monotonous, boring chores like importing transactions or manually inserting them. It's a good way to do a half budget. Or maybe you record some of your transactions, but not all of them. And if we only have half the picture, we have nothing. And so don't do that. What we want to do is we want to automate some of this tracking, right? We can do software that will pull in our transactions automatically and automatically categorize them. We want to be using it to build awareness, like we talked about last week, and make better decisions. Not to have to do a whole bunch of boring work that's going to make us not want to budget. And so again, a lot of people, they just make budgeting this huge chore and make it way more work than it needs to be. And you can automate some of this stuff and make it easy for yourself. And a simple, easy budget is going to be the one that you're actually going to follow. Number 4, though, you can go the opposite direction. And so budget blunder number 4 is overly automated, right? You can automate everything. You say, my budget automatically sets, restarts for the new month. It automatically puts all the money in the categories, automatically adds all the transactions and categorizes them. I don't even need to look at my budget anymore. What's the point of that? Because the whole point of a budget is to build awareness and help you make decisions with your money and put more money here and there. And so you can actually go the other direction and overly automate this thing. We don't want to do that either. So instead, we want to actively engage with our money, right? We want to set up some things to be automated, but not everything. We still need to act on that budget. Budgeting blunder number 5 is forgetting irregular expenses. Right? This derails a lot of people in their budget. They think that they only spend X amount on all these different categories, and they forget about the every 6-month bill or the annual bill or some of these. Things break down. Right, your vehicle breaks down, an appliance breaks down. We just don't think about these things, and then whenever we keep getting hit by these irregular expenses, and it breaks the budget every time, and then we feel like budgeting doesn't work. And so we can't forget about that. That's why in YNAB's 4 rules, which we covered last week, go make sure you listen to that if you haven't. Embrace your true expenses, right? Really pay attention to, hey, what are these actual expenses that I have, even if they're not monthly, even if they're not recurring, and how do we budget for those things? So again, listen to that episode again. That's going to be a key part in maintaining your budget, and don't make this budget blunder where we keep forgetting about these irregular expenses. Budget blunder number 6 is treating credit card bills as an expense. Treating credit card bills as an expense. I've seen a lot of people do this, where we spend all this money on a credit card, and then we get the bill, and that's what we budget for. Right? Like, oh yeah, my credit card bill is sometimes $1,200, sometimes $1,800, sometimes $2,500, whatever it is, and we think that the credit card bill is an expense. But that can really derail our budget, right? Because it's going to vary quite a bit in terms of what we actually spend on that credit card, and so it can oftentimes, normally we spend $1,800 on our credit cards. We're budgeting for that, and then the bill comes in as $2,500. And here's the thing, right? Credit card bills are not an expense. They're a collection of expenses. The actual expenses we had is wherever we swipe that card. And that's what we need to be tracking. We need to treat our credit cards like they are a bank, not in that we have all this money, but in that we are paying attention to every time we swipe that card and where is that going, and tracking those. And YNAB, that You Need a Budget software, we talked about it last week, it's the one that I use, does this better than anywhere else, where at the beginning of the month, if you have X amount of dollars, right? Maybe you got $5,000, maybe you got $10,000, maybe you got $2,000, whatever your monthly budget is. When you swipe a credit card and it automatically imports that transaction, it subtracts that money out of your budget right then. The moment you swipe that card. It doesn't do it at the end of the month when you get that statement. It doesn't do it, somewhere in the future. It does it immediately, so you can see, hey, yes, we have all this money in our checking account, but we also have all this money on our credit card that's offsetting that, and so we don't actually have that money in our budget. And so too many of us, right, we look at our bank account and say, hey, well, I got all this money in my bank account, I can afford this, and we forget that we have all those credit card balances offsetting that. And so again, obviously, if you roll balances on a credit card, you shouldn't be using them at all. We need to get rid of those. But even for people that put a bunch of transactions on the credit card, pay it off at the end of each month, that paying it off, that's not the expense. All the places that you spent money on your credit card, those were the expenses. That's what we need to track in our budget. So that's a big one. I see a lot of people doing that, and we need to expense our true expenses, right? We need to embrace our true expenses. That's rule number 2 in YNAB. And we also need to expense our true expenses and actually keep track of where we're spending money on credit cards, not just credit cards as a bill. So don't make that one. Budget blunder number 7, the invisible budget, right? Sometimes we make this great budget and it's beautiful, and then we stash it away, and it's in a drawer somewhere, or it's saved locally on our computer at home, and we don't always see it. And the problem is, if our budget's not visible to us at any time, then we don't have up-to-date information to make on-the-spot decisions, right? We don't really know if we can afford this purchase or not, because we don't actually have access to our budget. And so we want our budget to be with us at all times. And that's why I really believe in YNAB and some of these other things, because then you have the power of your budget in the palm of your hand anytime. And anytime you want, you're like, hey, can I actually do this? You can just pull out your phone and say, yep, we've got X amount of money in our budget. We can do this. It's right there. It's all funded. And so it's just a great way to make sure that you are making the most of your budget. It's not having an invisible budget, that's the blunder, but to have it with you at all times, and so you can view that. Budgeting blunder number 8 is budgeting alone, right? This is really when you're married and you have joint finances, and one person does a budget and the other one just kind of ignores it, right? And then you start getting all these issues where the budgeting spouse starts giving the other spouse an allowance, or all of these different things, and then you start having disagreements and arguments and fights and all this, and it's just not great. So obviously you want to budget together, right? And some of the best practices, which we'll cover in just a second, there's 3 of them in there that are specifically for budgeting as a household, budgeting with your spouse. So make sure that if you start following those, some of those will get better, but you can't budget alone. You can't have one person in a marriage budgeting and the other person just ignoring it. Just doesn't work. So don't make that blunder. And the last one, budget blunder number 9, is budgeting for free, right? And this is where we think we can save money by just doing it on a spreadsheet or doing it on a notebook or getting some free software that isn't as great. And we see things like YNAB, and maybe you checked it out over last week and you saw that it costs something. You're like, I don't want to pay money. Pay money? Are you kidding? I'm not gonna subscribe to this software that's gonna help me with my money. And because we kind of have this, a lot of us can have this mindset that all of our money that we can possibly have, right? We pay our bills that we have to, and then as much as we can, let's make sure we spend the rest on entertainment. And we just need to break that mindset for one, but we got to think about actually having a budget is going to help us save money. It's going to help us do better with money. It's going to help us control our money, and that's worth something. And so, all the free methods, the spreadsheets, the notebooks, all these things, the ones that are totally free, those are really only free if your time is worth nothing. Because you're going to spend so much more time trying to maintain those budgets and trying to manually put in transactions or import them and do all these things. Like, that all takes so much more time that it's not free. And you would save so much time and therefore so much money if you had a software that's doing that monotonous work for you. So it's only free if your time is worth nothing. And it also becomes much more expensive if you're not doing it right or not doing it to the best of its ability. Because doing a budget right will save you tons of money. It will help you fund all your goals. It'll help you achieve your dreams. It's one of the greatest acts you can do. And so not doing all that thing is very expensive. And so it's worth the money to put in a little bit of money to make sure that we are in full control of our budget. Decrease your Roth contribution, for goodness sake, by those couple of bucks if you need to, because you'll be better off. You'll end up being able to put more in your Roth by having a good budget than you will by trying to do it all for free and not actually having a budget. So don't try to budget for free. Just pay for something good, and that's going to get us right into those best practices, right? So we had 9 blunders and now 9 budget best practices, and we kind of addressed some, right? And you said, well, didn't we kind of address all those? We had 9 blunders. Didn't you just have the best practices right after those? And no, because some of those blunders, they're really bad things you can do, and kind of the comments behind those, the solutions to that is just to kind of bring you back to neutral. Now we want to actually take you to best, and hey, what are the best things we can be doing with our budget? So best practice number 1 is to use YNAB. You Need a Budget. That's the software. It's an app. It's a desktop app. You can log into it in any browser you want, on your home computer, at work, on someone else's computer if you need to. And then it's got a world-class mobile app that's with you at all times. It automatically imports transactions. It categorizes any of them that you need. It's really easy to set your budget up each month. You can set goals in there to say, hey, I want to save X amount each month towards this thing. I want to fund my Roth IRA by this much. I want to put this amount into my HSA. We got these expenses coming up. So how do we make sure that we put X amount each month into Christmas gifts or to the annual property taxes or whatever else it is? It does all that stuff, and it does it better than anyone else. So one of the best things you can do for your budget is just to use YNAB, right? You need a budget. That's the whole point of this whole thing, is that we need one. I need one. I use it constantly, and we love it. So I don't get paid to represent them. I just love them. I've used them for a long time. Technically, if you use one of the links in the podcast, description or in the blog, that'll give me it's my referral link, so I get a free month for myself if you use that link. Ooh, I save $8. It's really not. I don't do it for that. Right? I do it because I really believe in this software, and I've seen so much benefit for myself and my family, and so that's why I recommend it. So best practice number 1 is to use YNAB. Number 2 is to automate transactions, right? And YNAB will do this, but I guess you could try to find another software that will do this as well. But you want to connect your banks and your credit cards so that it will import all those things automatically, right? We don't want to be manually tracking all these things. And YNAB is going to recognize any previous transactions you had. It's going to categorize those, so then all you have to do is approve, like, hey, we saw you spent this, and this. Is this where all that's supposed to go? And you say, yep, that's all correct. It's perfect. So that way you still have that awareness, right? You're still checking it. It's not so automated that it just does all that in the background, but it does all the heavy lifting, all the monotonous, boring things of doing a budget. You can also set transactions to repeat, right? And so we say, hey, we've got all these different insurance premiums that go out at different times of the month. We're going to set those on repeat. So then at the beginning of the month, it reminds us, hey, by the way, you've got these recurring transactions that are going to come out later in the month. Make sure that you put enough in that category at the beginning of the month to cover all that, right? And so there's just a lot of things that we can automate, a lot of those transactions we can automate to make building and, more importantly, maintaining and following our budget that much easier. YNAB does it better than anyone else. I suppose you could try to find something else that'll do that as well. But that's best practice number 2, is to automate transactions. Budget best practice number 3 is to create budget habits, right? And we cover this a lot in our in our couple episodes we did back in the day where I think it was episodes 75 through 77 were on financial habits. And 76 in particular was on how do we make good habits, how do we build good financial habits, and we used budgeting as an example. So if you didn't listen to that, go back. You can go to retirementmentorship.com/76 or scroll back through your podcast player and you can find that or in YouTube. And that's going to be a good one to tell us how to do that, right? And we can set up a lot of automations and stuff at the beginning. That's going to do a lot of it, but we also need to actively engage with our budget. And so we want to create these good habits. And so there's 3 budgeting habits that we should make to get the most out of this best practice. The first one is creating a budget, right? We need a habit of probably monthly, or maybe it's every pay period, going in and giving every dollar a job, right? You get all that money at the beginning of the month or every pay period, and that's rule number 1 for YNAB, right? We covered that last week, is go in and assign all those dollars a job and fund your goals and fund your expenses and all those things. And that's going to be a great way to do that. So that's the first habit you want to do, is creating a budget at the beginning of each month or pay period. Number 2 is reconciling your accounts. That's where you're making sure that what you have in YNAB is also what you have in your bank. I don't know if you've ever done this in the old school, like when you have a check register and whatnot, and you're tracking all your transactions, but you missed a couple, and so you think you have more money in your bank, and then you check your bank account, and you're like, oh wow, we actually spent more than we thought. Like you got to make sure those are okay. And so YNAB has a great feature where you hey, this is what we have. Is this what you have at your bank? Great, perfect. We're reconciled. You're all good. No, well then let's go find the transaction that's missing and making sure that we're on top of that. Or you can just add one. Say, I don't know where it is, but let's just add a transaction to make it fit. And that way you're never getting outside, and you can always trust that what you see in YNAB is true. So I do that weekly for me. So I create a budget monthly and I reconcile my accounts weekly. It's 2 habits. And then the third habit is categorizing transactions. And that's where, again, if you're using YNAB, you just open your app. It'll show, hey, you've got 4 transactions in here to categorize. You pop them up. It recognizes 3 of them and you just say, yep, approve. And that 4th one is a new place you've never spent before. And so you got to just tell it where that's supposed to come out of, and then you're done. And I do this daily. It's a really easy daily habit to make, to do. It takes just a few seconds if you're doing it daily. And so that may be one of those things where, hey, instead of scrolling social media, or maybe even quickly before you scroll social media when you're, doing your business or whatever else, waiting in line at a grocery store, instead, before you tap on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, just tap on YNAB first, categorize a couple of transactions on there. That's keeping you aware of where your money is going at all times. And it's just a great, easy daily habit. And then it makes creating a budget, makes reconciling accounts, makes all these things very easy to do when you're constantly in there categorizing transactions. And that's so those habits, if you're doing those 3 habits, that's why it's best practice number 3. You have those 3 habits. If you're doing that, it's going to help us continue to align our use of capital with our values and making sure that you are funding the things that you say are truly important to you. So the next 3 best practices here are, so the first, let's review real quick. First 3 are use YNAB, automate transactions, and create budget habits. And then these next 3 are for spouses, for married couples that are doing joint finances. How do we make the best of our finances together? And so the first one is to budget for joint goals, right? To budget for joint goals. This is assuming we have joint goals, right? But this is a great exercise where not only do we want to dream together and dreaming together and creating goals together and things we want to do as a couple, as a household, that really helps bond you as a marriage. It's one of the best things that you can do together. But beyond just kind of making these ethereal hopes and dreams, when you are actually then budgeting together as well and budgeting for those goals and say, hey, how can we not just have this be some high pie in the sky dream, but how do we actually make this a goal and really make a plan to achieve that? And how do we start monthly putting money towards that? And that's just, it's an amazing thing. And Kayla and I do that, my wife, and we love just being able to focus on our goals and actually making those a reality by budgeting for those things together. And so not only is it a great thing for your finances, it's also a great thing for your marriage to really sit down and budget for those joint goals. Number 5, this one's a game changer. This is an absolute necessity if you're married, is to have his and her spending money, his and her spending categories. So if you're married, like one spending category for each spouse. And like Kayla and I, we put the same amount in each month. And because when you're operating as a household, right, most bills are household bills, right? The mortgage, the insurances, groceries, gas, all these things, right? Like that's all household things. And even though I spend more on gas because I travel for work and do all these things, like that's still a household thing. We do that for the family, right? But then there's other things that we only want to spend on ourselves. And so instead of constantly having to, either just spending money and then you start bickering and you start saying, hey, do you really need more clothes? Do you really need to buy another computer software program? Like, do we really need to be doing this stuff? If you each have your own money, you can spend that money guilt-free as much as you want, all the way up until you're done for the month. And then you're going to get more next month. And so if she wants to, spend a bunch on coffee and is constantly coming home with a coffee, or goes out for coffee with a friend, or she wants to buy clothes, or she wants to do whatever else, she can do that. And if I want to save all mine up and then make some big purchase that costs $300, $400, $500, I can do that because it's my spending money. It's her spending money, and so it allows you to enjoy some money on your own, guilt free, and no problems. There's no arguments. There's no issues there at all. And so a couple things on that too. Like for us, like clothing comes out of our individual spending money, right? We don't have a clothing budget item because, and we have a kids is another category. And so if the kids need clothes, that'll come out of that category. But if my wife needs clothes, that comes out of hers. And if I need clothes, that comes out of mine, because I may be more content with the clothes I have than her. And so we don't need a joint category that's mostly going to one person. That comes out of, increase, get rid of your clothing categories and increase your individual categories if you need to. Same thing with like eating out. If I eat out individually by myself, if I didn't pack a lunch and I go out for lunch while I'm at work and spend some money there, that comes out of my spending money because I'm the only one that's enjoying that. If we go on a date, that comes out of our date category. We got a separate category for when we do things together because that's us investing in our marriage together. And so it really just helps. Like again, there's no judgment. You're not attacking each other for how you're spending it. You can spend however you want. If you spend all your spending money in the first 5 days of the month, bummer for you. Now you got to wait till the beginning of the next month before you can spend anything else. But this is an absolute game changer, and you have to have his and her spending categories. Number 6 is then to own categories, right? So I'm a financial planner. My wife was an art teacher, probably will go back to doing that again, but right now she's working at home raising our children, right? And so it probably will surprise none of you that I manage the budget and that I, set it all up, and out of those habits, right? I do number 1. We do number 1 together. I mostly kind of set the budget and then we talk about it together. And I do all of the reconciling, habit number 2, and most of habit number 3, right? Most of the categorizing transactions. I got pretty good habits around that. And so every once in a while I'll just send her some and say, hey, there's some transactions in there I didn't recognize. Can you categorize those? And she'll jump into her YNAB and do that. And so, it probably doesn't surprise a lot of you that I do a lot of the budgeting in our household as a financial planner, but there's a few categories that she manages, that she owns. And in addition to her spending, right, she owns grocery when she's setting grocery orders and all that stuff, make sure that she's not going over that. Kids, if we need certain things for the kids, she's moving money into those categories and making sure that we're limiting purchases in there only to what we have in that category for kids. So yeah, they need these clothing or whatever, and they also need this clothing, but we can wait till next month on that because we already ran out of the kids' budget. Those types of things. Gifts, she's a big gift giver. I'm not. I don't give any gifts, really. She loves it, and so she manages that. And there's just kind of this other category, like random things you need for the household. Again, we'll buy those things all the way up until we're out of that other category, and then we got to stop and wait till the next month before we get anything else. So she doesn't have to manage the whole budget. She just has to manage 4 categories, 5 including her own spending. And so that makes it easy for her because she doesn't love spreadsheets like I do. She doesn't love all this stuff, but it can be easy if you just own a few categories, and that really keeps her involved in the budgeting process instead of, again, like we had in one of the blunders, right, where I'm budgeting alone and she's not really paying attention. And that's why she loves it. Again, she's an art teacher. She's a mom. She doesn't, numbers are not her thing, but she loves having a budget because she loves being able to just know at a glance, hey, do I have enough money? Do we have enough money as a household to buy this, to pay for this, and being able to make those good decisions after that. Number 7, let's roll through the rest of these here. Fund yourself first. Fund yourself first, right? Whatever your goals are, whatever your dreams, the things that you say are important to you, make sure that when you're creating that budget that you are putting money towards those things at the beginning. Don't wait till the end. Don't wait till you've paid all the bills. Don't wait till you've done all those other things. And then, if we have any more money, we'll put it in our Roth IRA. If we have any more money, then we'll go on a date together. Fund the things that are important to you first. Make sure you're earmarking some of those, and then constrain yourself on the other things. And you might say, like, what? We said this vacation was really important to us. Maybe we shouldn't go out to eat tonight. Maybe we should keep that money in that budget and just cook from home because we funded that first. We didn't wait till we were done eating out for the end of the month and, we had $13. I guess let's throw that in our vacation budget, see if we can finally end up going. That's not going to work, right? You got to fund yourself first. The things that we want to do need to have money put into those categories at the beginning of the month or the pay period. So number 7 is fund yourself first. Number 8, consider the trade-offs, right? Kind of goes into what I was just talking about, but budgeting really is helping us see trade-offs, right? We have a limited resource. We don't have unlimited funds. We can't just buy whatever we want and spend money wherever we want. We have to have those trade-offs. So do we want to go on that vacation, or maybe we don't want to go on as many vacations and we just want to enjoy more life as we go and go out to eat more and go on more dates and those types of things. That's a trade-off, right? Do we want to really, buy a bigger house and spend that much more on a bigger house, or do we want to be able to retire someday? Do we really need that brand new car? And do we want $700 a month going out to this car, or can we buy something that's $300 a month and have $400 per month to do all these other things and fund all these other goals that we thought are important? And if you don't budget, if you don't know where all your money's going, you can't make those trade-offs. You can't do those things. And so considering the trade-offs is really one of the main keys of budgeting, and is a great best practice to do. And then lastly is number 9, best practice number 9, delay optional spending. If you got this other category, you got these things that you'd like to have, but you don't really need them. Sometimes you check your budget, you see, hey, we've got money in other, we've got money in this category, like we can technically afford this. Just wait. Because what will often happen, right, is you see something on the 5th of the month, you've got the money in your budget, so you buy it, you didn't go over budget, you're good, but then some unexpected expense comes up later, and now we don't have the money to cover that, now we're, dipping into savings, or worse, putting on a credit card that's not funded, and so we don't want to have to do that if we can help it. And so whenever we can, if we see something that would be nice to have, but we don't need to have it, just delay. We're not saying no. We're not saying no, we can't have that. We're saying not right now. Let's wait till the end of the month. And if we still have the money in the category at the end of the month, if nothing unexpected has come up, we can buy it then. That's going to do 2 things, right? We're not going to have any more of those unexpected expenses that keep ruining our budget. We'll still have money set aside for those things. But then 2, a lot of times you get to the end of the month and you might not even remember what you wanted to buy, which will save you the money. Or maybe you do remember, you're like, you know what? It's just not that important. Instead of spending $80 buying that thing off of Amazon, or that thing that I saw in that store one time that I wanted as an impulse purchase, because I didn't say no, I just said not yet, right? And delayed. Now that I look back at it, I don't want that. Instead, let's put that $80 towards our goal. Let's put it towards our family vacation. Let's put it towards an awesome date night, or a weekend away with just me and my spouse. Or let's put it in retirement or wherever else, right? Funding yourself. And so you want to fund yourself first, right? You still want money going into all those things you say are important. But then at the end of the month, you may have additional money. Think of that, right? You actually had extra money at the end of the month to put on top of that, funding yourself first. And that's a good way to accelerate your goal. So just delay optional spending just until the end of the month, until the end of the pay period, and only buy it if you still have the money then. Don't spend all your extra money at the beginning of the pay period. You're gonna mess yourself up down the road. So there you go. All right, episode 99, 9 budgeting blunders and 9 best practices. I hope that was helpful for you. So go back and listen to the last episode if you haven't yet on You Need a Budget. We're going to have one more episode here, episode 100 full episodes of the Retirement Mentorship Podcast. There's some bonus ones in there. That's probably why you see more episodes than that in your podcast player. But it'll be our 100th full episode, and I'm excited to see where we're going with this. It's been great. We're going to keep going, right? We're not stopping at 100, but we got a special announcement next week at the end of the episode. So stay tuned for that. We'll see you next week. Cheers. If you enjoyed that, you would love being part of our free membership community. It's called Retire Membership, and it has a host of benefits, all for free. For example, you can always buy my book, 3D Retirement Income, on Amazon. But if you join us at Retire Membership, we will send you either a hard copy or paperback for free, provide the ebook and the audiobook so that you can listen to it if you don't have time to read it. In addition to that, we'll also provide you with a bunch of content that you can't get anywhere else. For example, we have our quarterly Retire Mentorship magazine, which comes out quarterly and has no ads whatsoever. It's just timely content to help you stay the course. We also have workbooks for our free online workshop to help you get the most out of those, flowcharts to help you make better decisions, and a weekly email to provide timely content that you can unsubscribe from at any time. We never ask for any payment information, and we never share your information with anyone else. We just want to provide timely content and help you stay the course to retire successfully and stay successfully retired. There's no reason to wait, so join us now at retiremembership.com, where you can click in the link in the description and it'll go right there. We can't wait to see you in the community. Cheers. This podcast is educational only and is not investment, tax, or legal advice.